I moved into the duplex the last week of January. Wilmington was cold and wet that month, grey skies, muddy streets, and just enough chill in the air to make everything feel heavier. I'd just gotten out of a long-term relationship and needed space, emotionally and literally. The place wasn't special. It was a one-bedroom in a neighborhood that felt like it had been forgotten. The rent was low, the ceilings high, and the walls thin enough to hear the wind groaning through them at night. But I didn't mind. I told myself it was temporary, just a stop on the way to getting my life back together. The landlord, an older guy named Harris, handed me the keys and barely made eye contact. "If anything leaks or sparks, call the number on the fridge," he said. That was it. No walkthrough, no rules. He left like he couldn't wait to be gone. I didn't think much of it at the time. People are weird. Landlords especially. The first few nights were quiet. That was the part I liked most. I'd been living in a city apartment before sirens, traffic, dogs barking at all hours. Here, silence wrapped around everything. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own breathing. I fell asleep faster than I had in months. But then the noises started. At first, it was just the pipes, or at least I thought it was. Sharp, metallic, creaks in the walls, always around 3 or 4 in the morning. I figured the cold was messing with the old plumbing. But then I started hearing something else. A kind of scraping sound above my bedroom. Slow, deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. I told myself it was squirrels or raccoons in the crawl space. It made sense. Old houses attract pests, still. Something about the rhythm of the sound, it felt too aware, like it stopped when I moved, started again when I stayed still. I tried not to overthink it. I even bought a white noise machine to drown it out. It didn't help. The sound got louder, more consistent. And then one night, something changed. I woke up around 3 a.m., not from a sound, but from the cold. The air in the room felt wrong, like the window was wide open. But when I checked, everything was shut. That's when I noticed it. A faint draft coming from above. I looked up. There was a door in the ceiling, a square cut into the plaster above my bed, framed with old wood. I hadn't noticed it before, probably because the light fixture was just below it, casting shadows across the ceiling. But now it was clear as day. A pull string dangled a few inches from the frame. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. Here's the thing, I'd looked over that ceiling a dozen times before, when I moved in. When I set up my bed, when I lay there reading, there was no door. I was sure of it, but now it was there. I didn't touch it that night. I couldn't. I turned on every light in the apartment and sat in the living room until sunrise, trying to convince myself that I'd somehow missed it, that maybe I was tired or stressed, that it had always been there. The next day, I grabbed a stepladder from the hardware store and climbed up to check. The attic door was stiff, like it hadn't been used in years. When I finally got it open, a wave of cold, dusty air spilled out. I aimed a flashlight inside and nearly gagged. The smell was mold and something else, something metallic, like rust or old blood. The space was small, cramped, barely big enough to crawl through. But what caught my eye wasn't the space itself. It was the footprints, tiny barefoot, dark smudges in the dust. They led from the far corner to the edge of the opening, then stopped. I climbed down without looking back. I called the landlord the next morning, told him about the attic, about the noise. He was silent for a few seconds, then just said, "Don't worry about it. Nothing up there but insulation." I pushed, told him about the prints, the smell. He sighed and said something I still think about too often. "You're not the first tenant to call about that door." Then he hung up. That night, I locked the bedroom and slept on the couch. I don't know why I thought the lock would help. Around 2:45 a.m., the white noise machine clicked off. Power outage. I sat up, heart pounding, waiting for my eyes to adjust. Then, I heard it. The creak of wood, slow and deliberate, from the bedroom ceiling, the attic door opening. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, like something was waiting for me to speak, to move. I stayed still, for hours. At some point, I passed out from exhaustion. The next morning, the bedroom was exactly as I'd left it. Attic door shut. No footprints, no draft, but I couldn't take it anymore. I moved out that weekend. 3 months later, I drove by the duplex just to see. Curiosity, maybe. The window shades were drawn. A for rent sign hung in the yard again. I kept driving. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I think about that door. About how I was so sure it wasn't there when I moved in. About how it opened by itself. And about those footprints leading toward the opening, not away from it, like someone or something had been. Living up there long before I arrived, and only came down when the house was quiet enough to listen. I was driving back from my uncle's cabin in northern Maine, cutting through those endless forest-lined back roads where the radio fades and the night feels too still. It was early October, the kind of night where the wind carries that first bite of winter and the leaves crunch under your tires like bones. I was alone in my car, a beat-up grey Honda Civic with a cracked headlight and a heater that only worked if you slammed the dashboard 3 times. I wasn't in a rush. I had music playing off my phone, headlights barely cutting through the dark, and the road stretched out like a ribbon of black velvet. No other cars, no signs of life for miles, just the road, the woods, and the occasional flicker of movement. Between the trees that I tried not to look at too closely, I passed a rusted-out mile marker, the kind that looked like it hadn't been read in decades. That's when I saw her. She stood at the edge of the road, just beyond the reach of my high beams. A woman in a pale dress, long sleeves, standing completely still, not waving, not moving, just. At first I thought maybe she'd been in an accident. Her hair was long and tangled, like she'd been outside for hours, but she didn't look hurt. She didn't even look cold. She just stared at my car as I passed. Now, I'm not proud of this, but I didn't stop. Something about the way she stood there, motionless, watching. I couldn't make myself pull over. I looked in my rearview mirror, expecting to see her, shrinking in the distance. But she wasn't there. Gone, like she'd never existed. I chalked it up to exhaustion. It was past midnight, and I'd been driving for 5 hours. I even laughed to myself. Just nerves, right? I rolled down the window a bit, breathed in the cold air, and kept driving. But 5 minutes later, I saw her again. Same pale dress, same long hair, same blank stare. Only this time, she was standing on the opposite side of the road. I hit the brakes. Hard, my tires skidded, and for a second, I thought I'd lose control. I came to a stop, maybe 20 feet from where she stood. She didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared through the windshield like she could see everything I was thinking. This time, I got out. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box and stepped onto the road. "Hey," I called out. "Are you okay?" Nothing. No response, just the wind picking up through the trees. I took a few steps forward, shining the light on her face. What I saw made my stomach turn. Her eyes weren't right. They were too wide, too reflective, like animal eyes caught in headlights. Her skin looked almost waxy, like it wasn't real, and the corners of her mouth were twitching. Not a smile, not quite, just twitching. I stopped moving. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around. Then she whispered something. I didn't hear it clearly, just a breath, a syllable maybe, carried away by the wind. But it was enough to freeze me. Then she took a step toward me. I ran. I didn't think. I just turned and sprinted back to the car, dove inside, slammed the door, and peeled off down the road. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely hear the engine. I didn't dare look in the mirror. I just kept driving. Eventually, I made it back to the highway, where lights and billboards and the occasional truck made everything feel normal again. But that normal never really came back. A few days later, I told my uncle about what I'd seen. He lives up there, near the forest, has for years. He got real quiet when I described her. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You saw her too." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He rubbed his face like he didn't want to say it out loud. Then he told me, "People in that area have seen her for decades. Always the same description, pale dress, long hair, never speaking. Some say she was a hitchhiker who vanished in the 70s. Others say she was a woman who froze to death, waiting for help that never came. But the details are always the same. And the worst part, you only see her once, if you're lucky. Twice means she's attached. She picks people sometimes," my uncle said. "Usually travelers, people passing through." I laughed nervously, but he didn't. He just looked out the window and said, "Leave the lights on at night. Don't answer if you hear her knock." That night, I stayed up until morning, every light on, phone in hand, staring at the front door. I haven't seen her since, but sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night and the trees close in around the road just right, I swear I feel her watching, waiting for me to stop again. Back in 2021, I moved to Kansas City for work. I didn't know anyone there, didn't really want to. I was coming out of a rough year, grief, isolation, all of it, and I just needed space. I found a one-bedroom apartment in an old building, downtown. It was cheap, had decent natural light, and the landlord didn't ask a lot of questions. The place was a little beat up. Peeling paint, creaky floors, one of those ancient elevators that groaned every time it moved. But I liked the quiet. I liked being left alone. My unit was for B. The only other apartment on my floor was for C. And for the first 3 months, I never saw anyone coming in or out of it. That changed one morning around 4 a.m. I was awake, couldn't sleep, and I heard movement in the hallway. Slow footsteps, pacing, then a knock. Not on my door, but on 4C. Then another knock. Then silence. A few minutes passed, and I heard a low voice. I pressed my ear to the door, but I couldn't make out the words. Just a murmur, like someone was having a one-sided conversation. I figured someone had finally moved in next door. Next morning, I asked the woman downstairs, Miss Keller, the building manager. She knew who was in for C now. She looked confused. "No one's in there," she said. That unit's empty. I reminded her I'd heard someone knocking. She just shook her head. It's been empty since March. Last tenant, well, he didn't leave on good terms. I asked what she meant, but she waved me off and said she had to go. That was the start of it. Over the next few weeks, things started to change. My lights would flicker at the same time every night to 13 a.m. I'd wake up and hear footsteps in the hall. Always slow, steady, like someone was pacing just outside my door. Sometimes I heard whispering, just fragments of words. A man's voice, hoarse and low, saying things I didn't understand. One night, I got fed up and opened the door. The hallway was empty, except the door to 4C was slightly open. That was the first time I really noticed it. The number plate 4C was crooked, like someone had tried to rip it off and gave up halfway. The door was pale green, chipped around the edges, and I swear it was colder in front of it than anywhere else in the building. I stood there for a while, just staring at the gap. Then, very slowly, it creaked open a few more inches. I didn't go inside. Instead, I walked downstairs and knocked on Miss Keller's door. She answered in a robe, looked like she hadn't slept in a week. When I told her what I saw, her face went pale. She invited me in, sat me down, and finally told me what happened. A man named Adam used to live in 4C. Mid-30s, quiet, kept to himself. No issues until early spring. One night, neighbors heard screaming, guttural, like someone was being torn apart. The cops were called. When they arrived, Adam was sitting in the hallway, completely naked, covered in scratches, blood under his fingernails. He just kept whispering, "It's in the walls." The apartment was a mess. Claw marks on the door, holes punched into the plaster, but no sign of anyone else. No evidence of an intruder. They took Adam away, psych. Hold. He was later transferred out of state to a long-term facility. No one had rented the unit since I asked her why the door would be open. She said it wasn't. She had the only key. She even showed me the lockbox. After that night, I tried to ignore the sounds. I kept the TV on while I slept, left a nightlight on like a kid. But the activity didn't stop. I started dreaming about the hallway, always the same dream. I'd wake up to knocking, open my door, and someone would be crouching in front of 4C, scratching at the wood like an animal trying to dig its way inside. When I'd get close, it would stop scratching, stand up, and slowly turn around. But I never saw its face. Then, one night, I heard something new. My name whispered from the other side of the wall I shared with 4C. I stood frozen, every hair on my body standing straight up. Then I heard it again, closer this time, almost like it was breathing right behind the drywall. The next morning, I gave my notice. Didn't even wait for the month to finish. I packed my car and left by that afternoon. Before I drove off, I glanced back at the building just once. There was someone standing in the window of 4C, watching me, perfectly still, face completely in shadow, but I could tell they were smiling. Miss Keller called me 3 days later. She said someone broke into 4C. The night after I left, she heard footsteps, saw the door wide open the next morning. Strange thing, nothing had been touched inside. Not a single thing, except one spot on the wall for long scratches, and beneath them, in small jagged letters carved into the plaster, "Tell him I'm still here." This happened in the winter of 2019. During one of those brutal stretches of cold, where even walking a block feels like punishment. I had just moved into a small studio apartment in Detroit, nothing fancy, just a converted unit above a corner store that smelled like cigarettes and spilled beer. Rent was cheap. The kind of cheap that makes you stop asking questions. The apartment didn't come with a washer or dryer, so every Sunday I'd walk 2 blocks to a 24-hour laundromat on East Jefferson. It was an old place, flickering overhead lights, cracked tile floors, and dryers that sounded like jet engines. But it was quiet at night. That's when I liked to go. After midnight, usually. Just me, my laundry, and a podcast playing through my earbuds. That night, I was folding towels when I noticed something strange. There was a kid sitting on one of the plastic chairs by the window. I hadn't heard the door open. No bell, no creak. He was just there, maybe 9 or 10 years old. Hoodie pulled up, jeans too big, shoes dangling inches above the floor. At first, I figured he'd wandered in from one of the nearby buildings. Maybe his parents were doing laundry in the back. But as I looked around, I realized there was no one else, just him and me. He was staring at the vending machine, not moving, not blinking. I paused my podcast, pulled out one earbud, and asked, "Hey, you okay?" He didn't answer, didn't even flinch, just kept staring at the glass. I took a step closer. That's when he spoke. Very quietly, almost a whisper. "It's stuck." "What's stuck?" I asked. He raised his hand and pointed at the vending machine. "The candy. It never falls." I looked at the machine. There was a single red pack of Skittles hanging on the coil, tilted just enough that it looked like it could drop any second. But it didn't. The kid finally turned his head to look at me. His eyes were wrong, not scary or glowing, or anything like that, just empty, like he was staring through me, like there was no one behind them. I felt cold, not because of the weather, the kind of cold that starts in your spine and spreads outward. I backed up, nodded politely, and went back to folding. After a minute, I looked up again. The boy was gone. No sound, no door chime, no reflection in the window, just gone. That would have been the end of it, just a weird encounter, if it weren't for what happened the next week. Same time, same laundromat. I walked in, loaded up my clothes, and sat down with my phone. 15 minutes later, I glanced toward the vending machine. The boy was back. Same hoodie, same seat, same vacant stare. I felt a chill run down my arms. This time, I didn't speak. I just watched. He didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me again. Same empty gaze, same voice. It's still stuck. I opened my mouth to say something, but the lights flickered. Only for a second. But when they came back on, the boy was standing. Closer now, maybe 5 feet away. I hadn't heard him move, and in his hand, he was holding something. A single red pack of Skittles. He placed it carefully on the edge of the folding table in front of me, then turned around and walked toward the back door. The door that led to the storage room. The one marked staff only. He opened it without hesitation and vanished behind it. I waited for the door to close. It never did. I stood up slowly and walked over to it, peered inside. There was no one there, just mops, cleaning supplies, and an old dryer with a busted door. I walked back to the table. The Skittles were gone. I left the laundromat that night with my clothes still damp. A few days later, I asked the owner if he had a son. He gave me a confused look. "No," he said. Why? I told him what I'd seen. He went quiet. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. That candy machine hasn't worked in years. I asked about the back room, about the kid. He didn't want to talk. But before I left, he muttered, "You're not the first person to ask." I stopped doing laundry at night after that. I drive to a different laundromat now, one with too many people and too much noise, because every time I pass that place on East Jefferson, I swear I see him through the glass, still sitting there, still waiting, still watching the same candy hang, forever tilted, never falling. When I was 16, my parents moved us into a small ranch-style house in rural Nebraska. It was one of those sudden life changes. My dad got laid off. My mum found a cheaper job out of town, and we couldn't afford to stay where we were. So, we packed everything into a U-Haul and drove 2 hours west to a place I'd never heard of. The house was old but decent. Beige siding, uneven driveway, a backyard overgrown with weeds. It had a strange layout kitchen right in the middle, bedrooms off to either side, and a single narrow hallway that led to the bathroom and laundry room. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. The first thing I noticed was the drain in the hallway. It wasn't a bathroom drain. It wasn't in the kitchen or laundry area. It was in the middle of the hallway floor, surrounded by faded tile that didn't match the rest. Like someone had added it later, maybe for flooding or plumbing reasons. It wasn't even flush with the floor, just a small round grate that sat awkwardly between the walls, like it didn't belong there. I didn't think too much of it at first, until I heard the voice. It was around 1 a.m., my second week in the house. I was coming back from the kitchen, half asleep, when I passed the drain and heard something low, wet, like a whisper gurgling through a straw. I stopped, knelt down and listened at first. It was just water dripping, echoing like the pipes were running through an empty basement. But then I heard it again, clearer this time, a voice, whispering a single word, "Hello." I jumped back, almost slipping on the linoleum. My heart was racing. I stared at the drain, waiting to hear more, but everything went silent. I told myself it was the pipes, or maybe I'd imagined it, but it kept happening almost every night around the same time. If I was walking down the hall, I'd hear something, words I couldn't quite make out. Sometimes fast, like someone speaking in another room. Other times, slow, drawn out, like someone was trying to call for help, but their mouth was full of water. I didn't tell my parents. They wouldn't have believed me. One night, I put my phone next to the drain and hit record. I left it there for 10 minutes. When I played it back, most of the audio was nothing, just static and the hum of the fridge in the background. But near the 6-minute mark, I heard something. Whispers, faint, too garbled to make out, and then a sound like fingernails dragging against metal. I didn't sleep. That night, I started avoiding that hallway. Took longer routes around the house just to stay away. I even taped a towel over the drain. It didn't help. The next week, it escalated. I was brushing my teeth late one night when I heard my name clear as day, a whisper right behind me. I spun around. No one was there. But the hallway light had flickered. I swear I saw a shadow at the edge of the drain. Just for a second, like something had retreated that same night. My mum knocked on my door. She looked pale, almost sick. "You been talking in your sleep again?" she asked. I told her I didn't think so. She said she'd heard me whispering from the hallway, that I'd said her name repeatedly, in a voice that didn't sound like mine. I told her it wasn't me, She stared at me for a long time. Then she said, "I thought so." That was when I realized she'd heard it too. We didn't talk about it again. A few weeks later, my dad had a plumber come check the pipes. The house had started smelling musty, like mold and soil. The guy was down there for nearly 2 hours, crawling under the foundation. When he came back up, his face was pale. He said, "That drain doesn't connect to anything." We stared at him. He explained that the hallway drain wasn't hooked into the main water or waste lines. It had no piping, just a 6-inch shaft that dropped straight into the dirt beneath the house. Nothing else, no reason for it to be there, no way for voices to echo through it. We moved out 2 months later. I still don't know what was under that hallway. I never went down there myself, never looked closer, but sometimes, when it's late and the room is quiet, I remember the sound, the voice, rising up from the ground beneath my feet, calling me by name. Back in 2020, I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above a bakery in Spokane. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to happen. People left their porch lights on out of habit, not fear. The kind of place that always smelled faintly, like yeast and cigarette smoke. My window looked out over a narrow alley. Across from me was another apartment building, slightly older, faded blue paint, crooked satellite dishes bolted into the siding. I never really paid attention to it, just background noise in the scenery of my life, until I noticed the woman in the window. It was a Tuesday evening. I was doing dishes, and I looked up at the glow coming from the apartment directly across from mine. The curtains were parted just enough for me to see someone standing there. A woman, pale skin, long dark hair, motionless. Her face was completely still, eyes locked on something just outside my view. I thought maybe she was looking out at the street, maybe daydreaming, but something about the way she stood there felt off. Too still. The light was dim, almost yellow, like it was coming from a single bare bulb. She never moved, not once. I stared for maybe 15 seconds before looking away, embarrassed for being a creep. But when I glanced back, she was still staring, this time at me, not past me, not down at the alley, directly at my window. Her head hadn't turned, her body hadn't shifted, but somehow she was suddenly staring right into my kitchen. I shut the blinds. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured her face. Not angry, not sad, just blank. Like someone wearing a mask that didn't quite fit. The next evening, I peeked out just to check. Her window was dark, no one there. I figured maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just a mannequin or some kind of strange shadow. My mind playing tricks after too much time indoors. But 2 nights later, she was back. Same window, same position, same expression. Only this time, her hand was pressed against the glass, and her mouth was open like she was screaming, but there was no sound. I stood there, frozen, not knowing what to do. I felt this overwhelming urge to go over there, to knock, to make sure she was okay. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. The apartment was empty, completely. I could see through the window just well enough to realize there was no furniture, no pictures, no light fixtures, no floor lamp casting that yellow glow, just her standing there, lit from nowhere that night. I called the property management company listed on a faded sign out front of her building. I asked if someone lived in apartment 2A across from mine. The woman on the phone paused. "You said 2A? Yes," I replied. "Across the alley from 203 Elm." She went quiet, then said, That unit's been vacant for over a year. We had a fire. No electricity in that unit. Nobody's rented it since. I hung up without saying goodbye. For the next few weeks, I kept the blinds closed. Tried to forget, but curiosity is a weird thing. One night, I cracked the blinds again. The window was pitch black. I breathed a sigh of relief until the power in my kitchen flickered and the microwave reset itself when the lights came back on. I glanced out one more time. She was standing in my window, not across the alley. Mine, same face, same dead eyes, no sound, no movement. I don't remember closing the blinds. I don't remember backing into the hallway, but I remember not breathing. I remember the silence being so thick it made my ears ring. When I finally worked up the courage to open the blinds, again maybe. 5 seconds later, she was gone. No trace, nothing but my own reflection in the glass. I moved out a month later. I never found out who she was, or what she wanted. But sometimes, when I'm walking through a new apartment or a hotel room, I'll glance at the nearest window and see a shape, just for a second. Pale, still, waiting. I don't look long enough to be sure, because part of me is afraid that if I stare too long, she'll see me again. And this time, she won't stay on the other side of the glass. This happened back in 2017. When I was working security for a remote gas station off Route 41 in northern Wisconsin. Mile marker 46. Locals just called it the cutoff. It was one of those places where truckers would pull in for gas and coffee, then disappear into the night. Nothing around but trees and blacktop. We didn't even have cell service half the time. My shift started at midnight and ended at 8 a.m. I was 23, broke and trying to save up for school, so I took the job without asking too many questions. The manager handed me a key, a flashlight, and said, "Don't wander past the pumps. Stay where the lights are." I thought he was being dramatic. He wasn't. The first few nights were uneventful, boring even. I'd sit behind the counter, sip coffee that tasted like burnt oil, and watch moths throw themselves at the fluorescent lights. Every now and then, a rig would roll in, headlights cutting through the trees like searchlights. But most nights, it was just me and the hum of the soda machine. Then came Tuesday, 2:14 a.m., a silver sedan pulled in. Not a truck, not a beater, a clean modern car that looked out of place on that stretch of highway. I watched the driver get out, a tall man, a dark coat, maybe mid-40s. He never looked at me through the window, just stood by pump 3 for a long time. No gas, no movement. Then he opened the passenger door. That's when I saw her. A woman, or a girl maybe. Her head was down. She moved like her limbs didn't work, quite right stiff, like a puppet on invisible strings. He guided her to stand beside him. She didn't look up, didn't speak. I got a weird feeling in my gut, the kind that sits heavy and low, like a storm building in your stomach. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. "Hey folks, everything all right?" They both turned to me at the exact same time, same motion, same angle, like they were mirrors. The woman looked wrong. Her eyes were open too wide, and she blinked too slowly, like she was trying to remember how her mouth moved slightly, but no words came out. The man smiled. "Just stretching our legs," he said. His voice was calm, maybe. To calm, I nodded, not sure what else to do, and slowly walked back inside. Watched from behind the counter. They stood there another 5 minutes, then got back in the car. But they didn't leave. They turned off the headlights, The engine kept running. I waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. I finally picked up the landline. Behind the counter. The emergency number went to the county sheriff's office. I explained what I saw: no threats, just something off. The dispatcher said they'd send someone. The moment I hung up, the car headlights flared on again, but the car didn't move. It backed up slowly, then stopped at the edge of the lot, just before the forest swallowed the road. The brake lights painted the trees red. Then it turned off again. Gone. Like they'd blinked out. No engine sound, no tires, just nothing. I stood there, confused, heart pounding, when I noticed something on the screen. The outside security camera was dead. Black feed, static. The other cameras were working. Pump 1. Inside the store, even the cash register feed. Only pump 3 was black. Then, I heard the knock, not on the front door. On the back, the staff entrance. Slow, deliberate. 3 knocks, pause. Then again, I didn't move. Couldn't. There shouldn't have been anyone back there. It faced the forest. No lights, no footpath. Just trees and gravel and darkness. I grabbed the flashlight again, forcing myself to the back room. The door had no window, just a deadbolt and a rusted handle. The knocking had stopped. I held my breath and pressed my ear against the metal. Nothing, then. I turned on the outside light. There was no one there, but I saw the footprints, 2 sets. One heavier, one lighter, bare feet, in the gravel, leading up to the door, then away, back, toward the tree line. The sheriff arrived 40 minutes later. I told him everything, showed him the footage, what there was of it. He looked at the static feed, shook his head, and said, "Sometimes weird stuff happens out here." He didn't write a report, didn't ask for a statement. He just told me to keep the doors locked and not to go outside if I didn't have to. I quit the next week. There was no reason, just a feeling that whatever had happened that night wasn't done. Like if I stayed there one more shift, I'd end up following those footprints into the woods. Sometimes I still dream about that gas station. Always the same loop, the headlights, the knock, the forest breathing at the edge of the light, and that girl's eyes, like something inside her had been watching me the whole time. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss another night of terror. We post true horror stories, real encounters, and the unexplained. And remember, what's waiting in the dark might already know your name. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay alert, and whatever you do, don't turn around.